Good morning, Jim. How are you? You're muted if you can hear me and you're speaking right now. I can unmute you though.
Okay. I see the mayor.
Hi there.
Hi there. Are we appropriately attired?
I think you look particularly snazzy, Jim.
Wow, that's the nicest thing anyone is going to say to me all day.
That's good.
Oh. I better go get my book.
Mr. Campbell, how you doing?
Hey, James, I'm good. Thank you very much. I'm trying to get organized, get my desk cleaned up here. Oh, you wore a tie.
Need to unmute yourself.
I think I'm unmuted, aren't I?
Can't hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, Jim. I hear you,
you.
Jim Campbell.
Okay. I can hear Jim Beer, but
Can't hear you.
maybe it's you.
Jim Beer, is your volume down on your computer? It must be.
everybody.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, Jim. How are you? And Jim,
Jim and Jim. Yep, I'm good. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Gotta find my volume.
We can hear you.
Morning, everyone.
There we go.
Morning, Randy.
Hey, Randy, how are you?
Hey,
Good.
Randy.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Lisa.
Randy, you haven't filed yet. What's up with that?
Oh, you know, I got things to do.
Randy, welcome aboard.
Yes, glad to be here.
Say, Lisa,
Yeah,
could you, until we're ready, could you take the slide down so we could see each other's faces?
sure. Cody, can
Just,
you?
just
Archie,
as-
why do you want that?
Well, just as we're doing this through the meeting, you know, one of the things that you lose in these meetings is that when there's a slide up, we lose the ability to interact with each other. So just if Cody, you can just be thinking about that a little bit. I don't want to over strategize it, but it does, you know, at least allow us to see each other. So to the degree we can, that's great. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, good morning. Let's call to order the meeting of the Destination Medical Center for May 28th. It is good to have you all here this morning. Just a couple things. I want to go over a couple of the rules of the road if we can. If we're having these meetings. It's become, I think, commonplace to lots of folks, but let's just make sure we're all set at the same level.
Hey, Mr.
First off, can you
Mr. Chair,
Go
this
ahead.
is Kathleen. This is Kathleen. Do we have a quorum yet?
That's an excellent question.
Let me look through the list here quickly and just.
Okay, because we need 6.
Do you want me to call the, I can move the roll call up here before I say anything. How about that? Would that solve the issue?
Yeah, I don't know how many pictures
Okay.
to be seen. So
Right.
yeah.
Why don't I do this? The first thing I'll do is call the roll here.
Okay.
Mayor Norton. Mayor Norton. Okay, we'll come back. Secretary Williams. Here. Commissioner Beer.
Here.
Mr. Doherty. Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Wheelock. Pam Wheelock, are you on? And our new member, returning member, Council President Saber, good to see you again.
Yes, glad to
So
be.
that's good. So we're missing the mayor and Pam Wheelock.
And Mr. Doherty.
I'm sorry, and Mr. Doherty, right. So why don't we wait a minute? I'll go over these, just some of these thoughts.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Here, Rebecca.
Yes, is that Mr. Doherty?
Yeah, I'm here, RT.
Good to have you. Glad you were here. By the way, one of the things, just as we're talking today, a couple of things. One is I can't obviously see when you're raising your hand, but do it in the camera. I mean, there are ways to do it in the chat function, which is great, but just do it in the camera and hold your hand up. And I just want others to assist as we're doing that. If you see somebody's hand go up, it's okay to just say, hey, RT, somebody wants to talk, okay? And the second thing is when you're talking, make sure you put your name out there, just so for the record we know So it may sound a little silly as you're saying your name all the time, but just know that's in the name of getting getting the record right, all that. Okay, so I'm going to call the roll one more time. Mayor Norton, Secretary Williams,
Here.
Commissioner Beer,
Here.
Member Doherty,
Here.
Member Campbell,
Here.
Member Wheelock, Council President Staver.
Here.
Okay, good. Well, thank you all. You have a copy of the agenda in your packet. Is there a motion to approve and a second?
Jim
So
Camp-
moved.
Second.
Okay, so moved by,
Jim Beer.
okay,
Sorry.
good, thanks.
Already forgot what I was supposed to do.
Jim Campbell, second.
You're trainable though. Yes, thank you. Okay, good. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Mr. Chair, this is Kathleen again. Unfortunately, in this pandemic, we got to do a roll call for
Do a
each.
roll call every time, exactly. My mistake. Okay, so in support of approving the agenda, Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Aye.
Member Doherty,
Aye.
Mayor Norton, Council President Staver,
Aye.
Member Wheelock, Member Williams.
Aye.
Okay, motion, those opposed? I guess I don't have to ask that. The motion passes. Thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes. Let's do it again, guys. Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Oops, I'm sorry. Can I have a motion to approve in a second?
So moved. But Jim Beer.
Thank you, Jim Beer.
Jim Campbell, second.
Okay, Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Aye.
Member Doherty,
Aye.
Mayor Norton, we're assuming is still out. President Staber,
Aye.
Member Wheelock, we're assuming is still out. Secretary Williams.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are really rolling, you guys. This is great.
You're
So
right
we've got to, go ahead.
This is Lisa. I'm just gonna
Yep.
do a quick check. The mayor can't get in the link, so I'm just gonna circle back with her, and I'm wondering if that's happening to Pam too. So I will just do a quick circle back with them to
Okay,
send them the link.
and, okay. All right,
Cody-
so I will
And the link again, that would be great.
say that one more time, please, Lisa.
I'm just gonna ask Cody to send them both the link again.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a pretty full agenda. The first thing I do want to do is to formally welcome back Council President Staver. It was great to have you on. We assume you'll come back refreshed on all of this, but we're very, very happy to have you back. And just to understand how all this works, there's one seat on the board that's always held by the council president or the president's designee. And so Councilmember Campion had served in that role, and Council President Staver is back. One of the things that I also want to do is later on, we're going to have a resolution supporting Councilmember Campion, or thanking him for his work. And I think I'm also very pleased to announce that our member Paul Williams has been reappointed by the governor. Thank you very much, Paul, for your service and for staying with us. Your blessing is you get to do it till 2026. So we very much appreciate you being part of that. The exact same for Jim Campbell. Jim, thank you very much. You've been with us from the start, and your service is very much appreciated. At the March meeting, we approved the annual private investment, and we also asked the team to come back with a way for us to take a more aggressive stance in supporting local efforts related to COVID-19 and, of course, the whole economic issue that has evolved around that. And so we're going to be hearing more on that later. Just for those of you who weren't part of that meeting, I did want to say that at that meeting we designated how much our investment was for this year. Our private investment was $272 million, which brings the total amount of investment for DMC since the beginning to $962 million. So we are about to go over the $1 billion mark, $1 billion of investment as part of Destination Medical Center. So we're pretty excited about that. As I also mentioned with those recovery strategies, we're going to be talking about that later in the meeting. And I think that's something that is really exciting. The team's been doing a lot of work in general. We asked them to take on this additional body of work because everybody has to right now. And I've gotten briefed a bit on it, and I think when we go to it later, you'll see they've done a lot, and I'm really excited about where they're going. In this meeting, we're going to go over a few things. We're going to go over our annual audit. We're going to discuss our 2021 budget and our work plan priorities. And we're going to get an update on some of the developments. And then we're going to talk a bit about our 2020 capital projects and some transportation planning. I also want to make sure that we know that the next board meeting has been changed. The date was originally September 24th, and it's now been moved to August 27th. So you should all have that information and a copy with that. Any update, Mayor and Member Wheelock?
You're both on now.
Oh, you're both on. Okay. Mayor and Member Wheelock, welcome. Sorry that was difficult. I think we're all wrestling with all of these, but we appreciate you being here. The time you missed was riveting, but not deeply substantial. So I will pick you right up from here. The next item on the agenda is the election of officers. And I wanted to call on the floor to see if anyone wanted to move any of the officers for election this year.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, and one of the things, by the way, Member Wheelock, is that I asked that if people could remember to identify themselves when they.
Yeah. Pam Wheelock. Yes, thank you. I've been on my share of Zoom meetings, and my apologies. I was on a call with my McKnight board chair, so board chairs are important.
Yeah, believe it.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to actually nominate a slate of officers. R.T. Ryback as chair, Mayor Norton as vice chair, Paul Williams as secretary, Jim Beer as treasurer, and Dale Martinson as assistant treasurer. And I'm pleased to be able to do this. It's an extension of the current terms. I think that we have been well served, and I think particularly in the next year, having some stability and leadership would be a great asset to us. So I would make that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a second to that motion?
I would second that, Staver.
Okay, great. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Roll call.
Aye.
Roll
Oh, I'm
call.
sorry. I'm sorry, you guys. I just got
Trainable.
this again. Yeah, trainable, exactly. Yeah, so we'll start with you, Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Aye.
Member Doherty,
Aye.
Mayor Norton,
Aye.
President Staver,
Aye.
Member Wheelock,
Aye.
Secretary Williams.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes and we pass that slate. One of the things I did want to say on this is that we never in the bylaws of this built in any kind of rotation for the chair. And while I love the position, I do believe that for the health of the operation, this should rotate more often. And so I'll be serving another year as chair, but would ask then a year from now that we elect a new chair that has to come from one of the 4 governor appointees. That will give us time for people to look for opportunities and hopefully someone will emerge throughout all that. So I just want to note that at next year's meeting, I will be stepping down as chair and that we should be electing another chair. I think also between now and then, we should also look at that issue of how, especially the position of chair, has a term to it, so that we can that can happen automatically in some way. Any discussion or? Okay. Again, with this, with the graphic up on the screen now, I can't see you guys. So anybody who wants to talk, it is not rude to just yell out, "Hey, RT," so I can see you. Okay. All right, so moving to the, let's see, to the next item. This is our audit. And I want to call on Craig Copenhagen to.
Consent agenda.
Yeah.
RT, consent agenda.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will go back to the consent agenda. Two items are on the consent agenda. One is the resolution I mentioned earlier for Councilmember Campion, thanking him for his work on the board. And I personally learned a lot from him. I think he's a person who brought tremendous energy to this, and it was really fun to get to know him, to work with him. And so we have a resolution in the packet commending him for his work. We also have on the consent agenda the certification of expenditures to deed. This is our annual report that we send to them. And then the budget year to date. That's not an action, it's a receive and file issue. So I'll now call the roll.
Is there?
There's a motion from Jim to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you
And
very
there's
much.
Second from member Wheelock.
Thank you very much, members. I appreciate you coaching me through this. Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Member Campbell.
Aye.
Member Doherty.
Aye.
Mayor Norton.
Aye.
President Staber.
Aye.
Member Wheelock.
Aye.
Secretary Williams.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move to the audit. And I'm again going to call on Craig Copenhagen from Clifton Larson Allen.
Greg, are you on?
More importantly, is your mute off?
Yeah, good point.
I am not seeing that Craig is on at this time.
Okay, why don't we delay that action? And I'm very comfortable having people prompt me if we forget to come back to that. So we'll delay that action. And Lisa, why don't you just give a shout out when he gets on, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, good. So let's move to item 9, and it's the DMC Metrics. We do this at the beginning of every meeting, and we ideally like to take a deep dive into one issue that we think is especially important. And this time it's the WMBE Goals. And so I want to turn it over to Lisa to have you dig into that. And I think this is also reflective of the conversation we had at the last meeting, where we felt we wanted to give as much transparency to this issue and urgency to this issue as possible. So I appreciate the team responding on this.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Chair Ryback, and good morning to all the board members. Thank you for your flexibility on being on our Zoom call, our second Zoom board meeting. A couple things on the metrics. I just wanted to do an introduction that at the last board meeting, we shared progress on our WMBE goals. Jory Johnson from our DMC team is point on this. You suggested that we come back with updated goals, and we are planning to do that today. So today we're going to do two things. We're hoping for your endorsement on our updated goals, or the recommendation that we have for these goals. And also we'd be interested in having you share your thoughts as we provide insight into the work plan that we are putting together to support those goals. So it's one thing for us to set the goals, but we need to make sure that we have a solid work plan behind these goals so that we can certainly meet them in a successful way. I'm going to ask my colleague Patrick Sieb and Aaron Parrish from the city to walk through a couple of slides just giving you highlights on this.
Thank you, members. Sorry, I'm having
I think you're muted.
Internet delay. I'm not sure if we I'm hoping I'm back now and just restating the, we had a set of, as a reminder, the DMC legislation asked that the city of Rochester establish a set of targets for WMBE participation. And the city did so and set a series of targets for both workforce as well as contracts. And in addition, we have been monitoring our progress against those targets, and we reported on those maybe 1 or 2 meetings ago and had a pretty robust discussion about a goal of stretching further. So after considerable work, again, led by Jory Johnson, who is a city employee but supported through the DMC initiative, and having worked and studied the target department, we are proposing and advancing, would like to advance to the city of Rochester a new set of targets that are displayed in the graphic, and you'll see that in the graphic, the columns in green.
You're not coming through. I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
My apologies. My apologies. So the new set of targets for 2021, 2022, and 2023, and you can see that they are consistent. And then we
Lisa,
have.
are you and Patrick in the same room?
No.
So can I just offer that one of the things that sometimes works in situations like this, and Patrick, you might want to give this a try, is there's a call-in number for the Zoom meeting. So you got to turn the audio off on your laptop or iPad, and then you can visually see it on the iPad, but the audio will be through your phone. That might work better for you if you're having internet issues.
Thank you. Hoping that we're I'm able to this is able to work now. So anyway, the set of goals is demonstrated in the chart, and then there is a work plan that is being developed that is both for the workforce participation part of the goals, and then on the next screen is the work plan that we're developing for the can you advance the screen, Allison? For work plan for targeted businesses. And so this is, as we are going through our 2021 budget and work planning process, you're gonna see a more complete description of the work plan associated with both of the targeted businesses and workforce participation, aimed at enabling us to be successful in reaching these new goals. This is going to be advanced to City Council for discussion at either their upcoming June 1st meeting or later in June. I can't recall the date. So it's really this conversation that we wanted to bring to City Council. So if we could just go back to the graphic, and Aaron Parrish has joined as well. If we could go back to the graphic on the targets, that might be just a first place to get any response from board members.
Mr. Chair, PM Wheelock.
Yes, go ahead, Member Wheelock.
So I'm just wondering if Patrick, I think the one of these that I guess I had maybe the most question on was women construction participation, given performance to date relative to, it feels like a stretch for the goals in the coming and out years. And is there any additional information that you can provide about a level of confidence about attaining those goals, or how they were set given our current performance levels?
Yes, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Member Wheelock. Yep. We understand that that's a stretch goal for us. This is an area where we are becoming much more intentional in terms of our identifying companies that can be certified in this area. So there are a number of companies that have not been certified so that they aren't aware of the opportunity, and that we're being much more intentional in our work with our contracting partners to be identifying and recruiting women-owned companies. So it's an area that I would say that we recognize that we fell short of our original goal, and in our performance in 2017 to 2020, and it's an area that we really want to be intentional about.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Randy. I have a
Yes,
question.
go ahead, Council President.
Could someone please remind me of the science behind setting some of the goals? Obviously, in some cases we're behind, in other cases we're on track, and at least in one case we're substantially ahead. But as those goals were set for future years, what is the science behind how those numbers were established?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Staver, and I'll ask Aaron to join in this conversation as well. So I would say the science behind it has been in part our performance, in part the recommendation from Minnesota Human Rights Department for this area of the state, and in part the sort of measure of opportunity we have for growth, largely around businesses that do exist in the region. We did exceed much of the targets where we exceeded was in fact due to our work with Mortensen, which has a very strong track record and built-in set of relationships that they were able to bring to bear in their project here in Rochester. And so we've used that as a way to learn and as a way to demonstrate opportunity. Aaron, you may have some additional comments as well.
Patrick, I think you covered it quite well. You know, there is a process that we went through that was generally based on work Jory had engaged with through the Federal Transit Administration, since we have a lot of projects in that space. That goes through a review of past performance, looks at our demographic information, looks at the number of certified businesses, but also aside from sort of the data review, there is sort of this aspirational element to setting the goals in terms of forecasting where we want the market to be, given the fact that we have, a large opportunity to influence that. I'd also say there is some differential you'll notice in the vertical constructions, the development projects that you see compared to, heavy construction, street and sewer work, where historically it's been more challenging to meet those goals. So we did try to adjust based on industries as well.
Mr. Chair, this is Paul Williams.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So this is a great question, and I like the goals and where they're falling. I like kind of pushing ourselves. I just thinking back, probably 4 or 5 years, actually probably even 6 or 7 years, at least in the metro area, when the state increased performance goals, both around minority and women-owned business contracting, which is one thing with businesses from those communities, and then the workforce inclusion, the workforce that's used in those projects. I mean, those goals were set at the time, I think, at close to 33% on the workforce side, and really, I think, put a jolt and put a stretch goal in front of the community, which in fact was met. And I think Mortensen is outstanding, I think, on this front. Ryan is quite good on this front as well. We know that from the experience on the stadiums, certainly on the Saints Stadium in St. Paul, the Light Rail project had to meet some of those aggressive goals. And so it is based, the science is based on population growth and kind of opportunity, but they're all an aspirational push to this that I think is actually valuable. And it may be okay not to quite make it. And the important discussion there is about, so why didn't we make it? It's not a, you either make it or you don't. It's more what they call the good faith effort, as many of you know, to get there. And so I like the goals, and to me, having a stretch goal there is absolutely valuable. And several of our partners really do have strong track records and really do use best practices in getting to these numbers.
Those are great points.
Yeah, I can't tell if I see my hand up.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, that's perfectly fine. I had one question related to the targeted businesses, why we don't have the incremental on those. They just stay at 7% throughout the next 3 years. And I wondered if there was a reason. So that was one question I had. And the other, I just want to mention, Rochester being a smaller community, in southern Minnesota, we don't have quite the opportunity for some of the minority and women-owned business hires that there are in the Twin Cities. And what happens then is that we go to the Twin Cities to bring businesses down. And I just want to, I guess, throw out there that there is this tension between hiring local firms and meeting the goals that we're going to sense. So I think they're great to have aspirational goals. I also just want to say aspirational goals means we're going to get criticism if we don't meet them. So I think it's good that we're having this public discussion about that. I do hope we can meet these goals, but if we set them too high, then we just face criticism for not having met our goals. So there's just those balances that we have to keep in mind.
Mayor, I think this issue you're touching on is a really important one about what is, without intervention, a tension between getting minority businesses, which are far more concentrated in the metro area, and getting local businesses. One of the things that was a real learning for me is when we were involved with the stadium, I was really proud that we said we're going to meet those goals that Paul Williams just talked about that were seen as extremely high. So we passed that, we felt good about it, but out in the marketplace, the reality was many of the businesses led by people of color did not have the working capital to compete for a project of that scale. So before I was there, the Minneapolis Foundation stepped in and provided working capital to some of those businesses to grow. If you put all that together with the point that I hear the mayor making, which I think is a really important point because local businesses matter a lot, I wonder if we should be looking more directly at some ways to disrupt the status quo and perhaps look at the idea of us or partners figuring out a way to provide working capital to emerging businesses of color in Rochester that would not normally have the working capital to compete for this. And I don't think that's something that we're going to solve here today, but I just think that's an experience that I'd love to have us think about, because if we're trying to change the marketplace, we can't expect the marketplace to be able to respond without some intentional disruption. One other question I have is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the racial makeup of Rochester, I understand to be very different than the percentages of Southeast Minnesota as a whole. Should we be setting this up against the target for Southeast Minnesota or for Rochester? And the question I guess I have on that is that the city of Rochester has more people of color, but the workforce of Rochester has always been Southeastern Minnesota. So I'm sort of conflicted about which we should be targeting off of. How have you guys looked at that, Patrick?
Well, we did, again, we did use the Minnesota Department of Human Rights as one of the mechanisms to help us understand what they saw as goals and what the sort of capacity of the region is to respond. So I think while Rochester itself is more diverse than perhaps the larger region, for the nature of this kind of work, we're drawing from a regional workforce to achieve this. I would like to get back to or just respond to a question that I heard the mayor ask that I don't think we answered, which is the the targets kind of stay flat for 3 years on a number of these. So I just wanted to respond to that question. So, I mean, I think that we are building, you know, part of being successful in this field is building the systems so that you can be successful. So Mayor Ryback, you mentioned working capital as a tool. At one of our other board meetings, it was suggested we break down the contracts into smaller, more bite-sized pieces so that perhaps smaller, less capitalized firms would be able to bid on those, and we've begun to do that. So there's really some systems development that we have to do in order to reach this next goal, to stabilize, to learn lessons, and then to revisit these in future years. So I think what we should take out of this is an intentionality to grow the targets, an intentionality to develop the systems and the work plan to be successful, and the understanding that these will be revisited and adjusted accordingly. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really a role that the City Council has based on the state law around DMC. And so I think the City Council is asking guidance from DMC, and the purpose of this conversation is guidance from DMC about where the City Council ought to take this conversation. And I know we have a very receptive City Council on this matter. It was brought to them in a study session a few weeks ago, and so I know they're looking forward to this direction. And Mayor and Council President Staver, you were part of that study session as well. So, so I think what we're trying to say here is we understand there's a need to keep moving the needle, and we understand we have to build the systems to do it.
Okay, good. Other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, Paul Williams again.
Go ahead, Paul.
Just, is there, can I get clarification on whether these goals are specific to MBE, DBE contracts, and or are they specific to workforce participation, which are two different things?
Yeah, there's a set that's related to workforce. Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Paul. There's a set that's related to workforce and a set that's related to contracts. So the on this graphic, the participation are the first.
The first four.
First four.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you very much, Patrick. I mean, just as a final point on this, when this legislation was passed, we did not have this in place. This was not part of the legislation, and I really applaud our team, and I think this board, which feels pretty strongly about it as far as I certainly can tell, to have this in place and to have us have benchmarks that we're working on, and I appreciate that. So thank you very much. Is Mr. Popenhagen joined us yet?
Yes, he has.
Oh, excellent. Okay, good. So let's step back to number 8 and call on him to give us the audit report.
All right, very good. The audit went off very smooth again this year. So I think this is our, gosh, year 5 or year 6, something like that. Working through the audit, so got the process down pretty well. Had good cooperation from the City of Rochester Finance Department again this year. That helps things go very smoothly in completing the audit. So I'll just hit on a little bit on the financials, results, and some required communications. Shouldn't take a lot of your time. So we did issue a clean opinion on the financials. Again, just a high-level overview anyway. The financials are presented in accordance with governmental accounting standards. Single program entity, basically, we're able to show a natural classification of expenses. Your DMCC's financial statements do roll up or get included in the City of Rochester financials as a component unit, same as last year. Next slide, please. So kind of a summary of the activity. Looking at the balance sheet again, basically with DMCC, funds come in through the city of Rochester. So those are the revenues. And then those revenues are used to cover some of the DMCC's own expenses. And then the largest portion gets passed through to DMC Economic Development Agency. So the residual basically that DMCC has is zero from an equity standpoint. So on the balance sheet, the assets and liabilities trend up or down depending on basically the timing of cash payments of when cash comes into DMC to when it's remitted on out. DMC, EDA, and other vendors. Next slide, revenues and expenses. So very similar to assets and liabilities. Revenues equal expenses or expenditures, given kind of the flow-through nature of the DMC operations. From an operating standpoint now, it seems like we've kind of hit our stride of normal volume of activity being about, say, $2.25 million to maybe upwards to $2.75 million of activity. It's pretty consistent for the last 4 years now. And here again, on the expenditures, that kind of drives the whole process, and the MAPS process and the TAL process that DMCC has in coordination with the city of Rochester continues to work very well. Audit results then. So we had a clean opinion on the financial statements. We had no findings on internal controls and Minnesota legal compliance. What that is a subset of state statutes that we specifically have to go out and test for compliance, and we had no findings there. Audit provides reasonable but not absolute assurance, so we don't look at things, basically 100%. We don't look at all of the transactions that go through, but we look at things on a test basis and things of that nature. There were no changes in accounting policies for 2019. We had no audit adjustments, so that is very good results as well. And again, just a very good working relationship with the City of Rochester and their finance department, so we appreciate their help. Next slide, please. So, items left to complete is going to be the IRS Form 990 tax return, as well as the related report up to the State Department of Revenue. So that there's been an automatic extension from the IRS to July 15th. We anticipate bringing these returns to this board in August. So when basically the state opens up the ability to extend the charitable organizations report that goes along with your 990, we will extend both again at that time. So that's the timeline that we're on. Appreciate all the help again from Dale Martinson and his team. And that's what I have for prepared remarks for you.
Well, thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the audit?
As your, this is Jim Beer as your treasurer. I've reviewed the audit and I'd agree with it. I'd motion approval.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair, this is Pam Wheelock. I'll second it, and then I have a question.
Yes, please.
I'm just curious about why the 990 could not have been presented and approved at this meeting before the July 15th. What requires an extension?
It's just more timing. Generally, the kind of the path that we've always been on is we we have the audit issued first, and then the audited numbers, once those are accepted by this board, are used to populate the Form 990.
It's just a routine question I ask because because we have the ability to file an extension doesn't mean we necessarily should file an extension. So I've often seen where they're presented together, and be lovely if we could do that, but I think this is completely workable, so that meets my request.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. Other comments? We have a motion on the floor, but not a second. Do we have a second?
I did second, Mr.
Oh, you
Chair.
did. I'm sorry, my mistake. Go ahead. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'm going to call the roll. Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Member Campbell.
Aye.
Member Doherty. Member Doherty. Mayor Norton.
Aye.
President Staver.
Aye.
Member Wheelock.
Aye.
Secretary Williams.
Aye.
I vote aye as well, and the motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll now pick the agenda back up at item 10. So at our March Executive Committee meeting, we obviously were quite concerned, as we remain today, obviously, with the changing climate of the economy and what that would really mean for our efforts. So what we asked for at this meeting was for our partners from the city and the county and Mayo to give us an update, which we'll be hearing from them. We also asked our team to look at what tools were at our disposal. The first value I think we put in that was the idea that the local response should be led and directed by those at the local level. We should be in a position to support that work to the degree we're asked and to the degree it's needed. And so we asked the team to give us clarity on what tools we could use. We obviously are strict interpretation of our work is that we work on infrastructure, and we wanted questions answered like, is small business infrastructure within the context that we're dealing with? What types of funds could we use if asked, and others? And so I'm looking forward to this report. I've been briefed a bit on it, and really want to thank the staff for using a lot of creativity. I also think it's important to remember that before this hit, there was some really good work being done by the staff on helping small business during the time of dislocation for the construction projects, especially in the heart of the city. What's handy about that is that there was already work underway talking about how businesses could be helped during a time of dislocation. Well, of course, this is a time of extraordinary dislocation. So the challenge is great, but I do think we have a head start because the team's been looking at that. So what I'd like to do first is to turn to, I think Lisa and Patrick, are you guys ready to take your part first? And then I'll ask for updates from the city, the county, and from Mayo.
Thank you, Chair Ryback. This is Lisa. So we thought we was, well, first, acknowledging that the world has been rocked by COVID, and the EDA staff very much appreciated the direction provided by our executive committee a couple of months ago. I think that really gave us areas to focus on, and we have done just that. So today, as Chair Ryback noted, we'll talk a bit about the direction that we have been going on the EDA staff on behalf of the DMC. First, we thought we would hear a baseline from from Mayor Norton and perhaps Board Member Staver on the city side, also from Olmsted County, Member Beer, and Jeff Bolton from Mayo Clinic. Then we thought we would talk a bit about our response. As RT noted, that we've been refocused, and we've moved some of our energy and our staff time to other areas in terms of the response. And then we'll talk a bit about this public infrastructure adjustments that we're recommending as we move forward. So perhaps, Chair Ryback, we could turn it to Mayor Norton and Board Member Staver for an update on the city's response to COVID.
Very good. Mayor Norton?
Sure. Well, the first thing we did is follow suit after the state, and I think the county also did state of emergencies. We did an emergency for our city. Within a day of that, we set up the Emergency Operations Center and started meeting daily to prepare for what was to come and be proactive. The city administration at the same time, with direction from the leadership, started 3 or 4 committees. Those committees were the Economic Stability Committee, and I'm going to let Randy talk about, he served on one of the subcommittees on that. I'll let him talk about what we did on the Economic Stability Group. We set up a homelessness team, and that group helped work with the county to move, to open a day center and ultimately move our warming center to join our day center over at the Mayo Civic Center, which was closed, and that continues to this day and through the end of June. Our library staff stepped in and along with some other city staff, staffed that day center, and then the nonprofit that the county contracts with continued the warming center at night. And we set up a call center about the same time, and again, the library staff staffed the call center. It's open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. for anyone to call about anything, basically, and they field a whole variety of calls, and we track those about what the issues are and how many we get every day. That continues. And then the third was kind of a neighbor-to-neighbor and food response network, and a team. Cindy Steinhauser from the city led that. Terry Spaeth led the one for economic stability, and Aaron Parrish led the one on homelessness. And those teams met regularly. Cindy Steinhauser helped facilitate 2 food drops that reached 1,100 to 1,200 families with 30-pound boxes of food that contained the first one was dry goods. The second one was dry goods plus chicken, eggs, and vegetables and fruits. And reached, I think it was, the second one was over 5,000 individuals, about 1,100 families. One was March 30th, the other was about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago now. And then neighbor-to-neighbor networking efforts are underway with Renee Laflamme from Our Neighbors helping support that work. So those are the 3 committees. The Emergency Operations Center continues to meet. We don't meet daily anymore, but we did start some joint meetings with the county. And then I'm going to let Randy go into the details. I think he wanted to talk about what the Economic Stability / Recovery Group, it's now kind of turned into Rochester Reopens, what they've been doing, because a lot of really great work there. Randy?
All right, thank you, Mayor Chipe, Mayor Ryback, members of the board, thank you. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the economic responses that the city has undertaken. You'll notice in your packet on page 49, right in the middle of the page, there's a sentence that talks about Keep It Local grant program. I'll elaborate on that a bit, as well as 3 other initiatives. The Keep It Local COVID-19 Innovators Grant Program, $100,000. That was funded by contributions of $50,000 from the city of Rochester and $50,000 from DMC. That program is administered by the Rochester Downtown Alliance program, and its real purpose is to encourage small businesses to team up with local service providers as they adapt to the challenges that they are all facing. There were 2 rounds of applications considered. The $100,000 was awarded to a total of 64 small businesses. The second initiative that the mayor alluded to is the City of Rochester Small Business Disaster Loan Program. The City Council approved $250,000 of sales tax economic development fund dollars for the creation of an emergency loan program for small businesses. An economic stability team was formed, of which I'm a member, And we led the development of the program, and our Rochester Area Economic Development Team, READY, led the administration and distribution of low-interest loans to affected businesses. The loan review team looked at a total of 38 loan applications. It resulted in issuing 13 loans totaling just over $249,000, almost the entirety of the $250,000 allocated. And it resulted in the retention of 123 full and part-time jobs in our community. So we're grateful for that. The third initiative is related to small business consultation support. And in an effort to expand the capacity of the Small Business Development Center, the city provided an additional $20,000 to the SBDC budget. The financial supplement has provided an opportunity to provide many hours of consultation and guidance as small businesses modify their plans to adapt to the impacts of the pandemic. And then finally, the City Council looked at ways to reduce the cost of doing business. The Economic Stability Team brought forward to the City Council suggestions on ways the city could reduce the cost of doing business, with a special focus on downtown parking fees, and in support of the local restaurants and bars, a deferral of liquor license fees until November of this year. Along the lines, I just want to say the city is also very grateful of the participation of Olmsted County and their decision to defer payment of property taxes for 60 days without interest or penalty. So those are 4 initiatives that we've undertaken at the local level to provide support to smaller businesses and try to provide whatever relief we can. So thank you.
Thank you. And then,
do you want, is it my turn? Okay.
Yes, it is your turn.
Jim Beer, Olmsted County Board. Some of the things we've been doing, as Randy alluded to, we deferred the first half of the property taxes from May 15th to July 15th. I think that's going to help some people out. Another thing we have done is we've been working with public health, is doing case and contact with all the local cases, taking some of the stress off the Minnesota Department of Health by doing these follow-up on all the local cases we have here in the county. We continue to have community testing site at Graham Park / Fairgrounds with Mayo Clinic and Olmsted Medical and others, and that's been working real well. Some of the testing has tailed off, people coming in for tests, but that's been it's been working very, very well as far as being able to get people and they drive up in their car and they're able to get the testing. Again, we've worked with our partners at the city on the unsheltered homeless. We've extended the funding again till the end of June for the civic center and / homeless shelter that we had set up originally, that we were going to stop at the end of the winter, which was the week called the end of winter, the end of April, but we've extended that through the end of June right now. We're also working with the Rochester Reopens to work with the hotels and restaurants within the governor's guidelines. A couple of other things I'd like to say. I'd like to give a shout out to all of our county employees. We've had to pivot a lot of our county employees into different jobs, and they've been very receptive and been very willing to work. Some of our people, you know, like maybe in property records and licensing, or some of the home inspections or building inspections, we've pivoted them into the EOC where they can help out because they're slow on their other end. So I'd like to give a shout out. I'd also like to give a shout out especially to Graham Briggs, our public health director. He's been doing a yeoman's job, and Captain Bromberg from the Sheriff's Department, who's been running the EOC basically nonstop since the governor's declaration. They've all been doing a good job. I think we're getting things, you know, in order. We're starting to think about reopening, and I think we have a plan, and it's just been working very well. So, you know, it's not the ideal situation, obviously, but things have been working well. That's my report.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. Appreciate that and your work. Jeff Bolton, are you on? And could you give us the update from Mayo Clinic?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Chair.
morning.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on the Mayo Clinic's response to COVID-19 pandemic. As you all know, the pandemic is extraordinary, both in terms of the health crisis affecting millions of people worldwide and also the global financial impact. And both of those are being felt in our city and state. Within weeks of COVID-19 being classified as a pandemic by the World Health Organization, Mayo launched 2 diagnostic tests, offered new treatment with convalescent plasma, started 8 clinical trials, began several science projects related to COVID-19, including work on vaccine development, while simultaneously taking our practice down to less than 20% of capacity, with a focus on reopening with redesigned protocols to maintain a safer environment given the threat associated with the virus. We also, during this time frame, moved about 30,000 members of our staff off campus to work remotely. The situation has been dynamic, currently continues to be, but throughout the pandemic, the response, we've made decisions that are focused on our primary value, staying focused on the needs of our patients as primary, and also our Mayo Franciscan values. And this included the decision to defer all elective and non-emergent appointments, surgeries, and procedures before it was mandated. Because we entered the pandemic in a strong financial position, we committed to protecting the pay of our staff through the end of April, despite very low patient volumes. However, as the impact of the pandemic progressed, continued low volumes made it necessary to implement temporary financial stabilization measures, such as releasing contract and supplemental employees, implementing a hiring freeze, implementing furloughs and salary and benefit reductions, and other expense reductions, including deferring planned capital projects, which we will resume once we are stabilized. The furloughs and reduced hours will have impacted almost 23,000 of our staff over the course of the year, so very significant. And very similar to Commissioner Beer, just a shout out to our staff. Their response to all of this has been really inspirational, just in terms of understanding what we need to do to secure Mayo Clinic's future. 2 of the larger capital projects that have been delayed are the Gonda vertical expansion and also the Discovery Square parking ramp. We are continuing with essential capital projects. So in terms of the parking ramp in Discovery Square, EDA, the city, Mortensen, or Mayo are working on a multi-pronged strategy to address parking without the garage on a temporary basis. The good news, though, is that in the past 2 weeks, we've seen increased patient activity on all of our campuses as the governors in all the states in which we serve lifted the COVID-19 executive orders banning elective procedures. After 6 weeks of very low volumes on our campuses, it really is wonderful to see our patients in the halls once again, able to get the help they need from Mayo Clinic. We're currently scheduling at an average of about 85 to 90% of our normal pre-COVID rate. But you have to keep in mind that these appointments are spread over as many as 3 months. So it will take time to fill calendars to their normal levels. However, the current trajectory does provide us with cautious optimism that we'll continue to resume our new normal work at the end of the year. And again, this will take time, but please know that we remain committed to DMC and ensuring that Mayo Clinic in the Rochester campus remains a destination site for worldwide patient care. From a safety perspective, we do recognize that we will be living with COVID-19 for the foreseeable future, both our community and patient populations. And so our focus is really on caring for people in the safest possible way, both COVID patients and non-COVID infected patients, as well as protecting our students, staff, and visitors. As we welcome patients back who need access to care for serious and complex conditions, we're taking appropriate extra precautions. For example, universal masking, enhanced cleaning of our facilities, testing, other screening protocols, and special safety actions within the surgical practice, all to provide a safer environment, which is, of course, our highest priority. Just in terms of volumes on the Rochester campus, hospital occupancy over the past week has been in the upper 60% range, but on a positive trajectory. Within patient surgical practices averaging in the mid 70% of normal activity, which is very positive, quick turnaround. In outpatient surgical procedural practice at 80 to 100% of our normal activity. So really a great trajectory in terms of patient volumes. Outpatient visits are at about 75% of plan. And the other promising thing, again, from a destination medical center perspective, in the appointments that we're scheduling, we are seeing good geographic diversity, at least on the domestic front, and are looking at the pent-up demand of international patients and how we bring them to campus safely. So in closing, I just want to extend my most sincere gratitude to this board and its service to the state. We appreciate our partnership and support from all of you as we tackle COVID-19. Mayo is proud of our medical professionals and scientists who are leading during the pandemic, but we're also extraordinarily proud of the leadership that has been demonstrated by the community, including the government, business, and nonprofit sectors. We know that the road ahead will be challenging for all of us and remains filled with a lot of uncertainty. We are seeing our friends and local business owners struggle under this new reality and hear daily about the significant financial consequences faced by many. However, Rochester, working together, has always been a strong and resilient community, and I remain confident that Rochester will emerge from these circumstances stronger. That concludes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and we really appreciate the frankness and the work that you've been doing. So thanks very much. Those were really helpful updates, and I think they give us a context for our role on that. So Lisa, can I turn it back to you and ask you to respond to some of the questions that we asked at that executive committee meeting and that you've been working on since then?
Of course, thank you. And thank you to our city and county and Mayo Clinic partners. We've been working in great collaboration with all of these groups and many, many more as we work through the COVID related issues. So thanks to all the partners. What you shared with us last time is a few things. One, accelerate job creation, which we have done, and we're moving those projects forward. Two, you asked us to keep our foot on the gas as it relates to our core work, so our business development work, our marketing, our strategic partnerships. Actually, a couple of you sent me separate notes and or calls to say, this is not the time to put your head in the sand. This is not the time to wait for things to settle down. Actually, this is the time for DMC to be somewhat aggressive and move forward and do what we were built to do. Which is support the economy, and we will support the economic recovery and resiliency. So to that point, here's a few things that we have been up to on the DMC recovery side. First, we've been listening, learning, understanding the gaps. There's a lot of noise out there. I mean, it's good noise, meaning people are really trying very hard to educate and to do what they can to help other businesses in this community and of course across the world What we have done, once we saw what was happening, we started a Road to Recovery webinar series, which was very well attended, and it was a statewide series. Most of our attendees actually were from the state, across the state of Minnesota, more so than locally. And we actually put ourselves in a position of being a thought leader, inviting experts in particular areas to help businesses, particularly small businesses right now. And we wanted to be leaders and activators where appropriate. This webinar series will continue. We've done it in various sectors, and we will continue to do just that, all around the spirit of safety and innovation as people start to think about how they will reopen their businesses. Virtual community engagement has been a new norm, to use an overused word already. So we've done community engagement normally in the old days, which is only a couple short months ago. We were very involved in networking events, in conferences, and seminars and sessions, and we've just simply shifted that work to the virtual community. So now we hold many of our community leader meetings, community engagement. We've started new meetings, such as meetings with the property owners in the downtown area, which has been quite fascinating to talk with the property owners who usually don't look across the table or the screen from one another, and have discussions about how they can work together to make sure that our main street, if you will, the core of our community, stays strong. So we're continuing those virtual community engagements. Heart of the City Business Forward strategy, which RT already talked about, we did have a good start. And I want to thank our staff and others. Jamie Rothie is pointing on this one from our perspective. And we shifted our work with the Business Forward strategy. Initially, we were trying to keep the businesses open, or helping them stay open during construction, and keeping people pointed in that direction with signage and doing some acceleration of construction. And now we are doing just that, but also some of those businesses are still closed and just starting to reopen. So we're working quite hard to make sure that we can have them reopen as successful as they can. President Council Staver already mentioned the Keep It Local grant. This is the grant where DMC put $50,000 in, and the city of Rochester put $50,000 in to support small businesses. We just received an email or a handwritten note today from one of the businesses who received a grant. And this business is working with another business, which is the value of this Keep It Local program. It's almost like a twofer. You know, we're helping two local businesses work together to create success. This particular business is working in the social media realm and the e-commerce realm, and they wanted to advance that so that they could open successfully, and this other company is helping them. So they sent us as a board a note of thanks for being involved in the Keep It Local grant. We will be highlighting all of those businesses who participated in the Keep It Local grant program as we move forward. We started a new series, and again, I want to thank the staff, Bill Von Bank and Aaron from our team, that really started something new. It's an opportunity for us to highlight 3 businesses at a time that are pivoting quickly, on the fly, trying to be innovative in terms of how their businesses are moving post-COVID. And so that series has been very well received, and it's online right now, and it's a regular ongoing series. We've developed some new partnerships or ongoing partnerships. Today we talked about this stability team and the Rochester Reopens team. DMC is very active in both of those, including other organizations across the city. And you'll hear more from Medical Alley today about an exciting partnership. We're working with them on One Discovery Square area. And finally, I'll just say that we've done a lot of work on the business development front and recruitment. One of our board members called me and said, this is the time for you to be sort of double down on business development and recruitment work, because as we move forward into Discovery Square, this work that we're doing now and developing these new relationships and getting people interested in Rochester or keeping them interested in Rochester is more important now than ever. And when we build these buildings, they will be ready. So This is just a snapshot, board members, on some of the work that we have done in just a few short months. And again, I want to thank the staff for being able to pivot quickly and fill in some of the gaps where appropriate on our end. Next slide, please. I'll pause there for a minute, and I'm going to go into now the resiliency infrastructure support that we're recommending so that we can continue some great efforts like this in support of this community and the state. But if anybody has any questions or comments about the work that we're doing.
Mr. Chair, this is Pam.
Yes, go ahead, Member Wheelock.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to share that I'm curious about how we kind of reestablish a new base for our work. I think that the trajectory that we were on and the assumptions we made about our ability to deliver economic vitality, new business development, growth in employment, et cetera, it just fundamentally changed as a result of what we've gone through and likely will persist. So I'm just a little concerned as a very public agency with how much we've put out about our goals over the course of the work of DMC, and just want to make sure that we are being as transparent as possible about sharing and documenting changes in our economic status or the data that supports that evidence, and that we are very intentional about not just carrying on with the assumptions we had about what will result from our efforts, but that we're very thoughtful when we know more and when it seems like the right time about resetting expectations, our own and others, about the priorities, the outcomes, the pace of our work and our goals. And I don't think now is the right time to delve into that, but I just wonder if we can ask staff to maybe come back at our August meeting with some suggestion about what's the data that we want to track about unemployment levels, about hotel occupancy rates, around business closures, business permits, just so we have enough transparency and can have a conversation with one another about how what's occurring economically, not just in Rochester or southeastern Minnesota, but across the world, is going to affect our ability to achieve the goals that we had expected we would be able to achieve just a few short months ago. So a request for maybe a discussion or agenda item at the August meeting.
Mr. Chair.
It's a really good, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mayor, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it is wise that we collect that information. I think unlike perhaps some others, our funding comes from the state and will continue. I think we have to be cognizant of the city's ability to continue to fund things moving ahead. I think that is definitely part of this, but we do have a, at least in the short term, the funding is not going to be changing for the next year. But I do think if we watch our numbers this next year, probably things will be more apparent about the effects on our community the following year. And so I think Member Wheelock's point about collecting data in the short term is really going to be important over this next year to see if we are impacted or if Rochester gets through this crisis in good form or not. And so I strongly suggest and support her concept for data collection because we are a transparent organization and we need to remain so. But we also have to be realistic about what's happening here, and if we need to make adjustments in what we're able to accomplish, we'll have to do that, and we'll do it publicly. And if not, and we're fortunate enough to find that the next year rebounds a little better than we hope, which my fingers are crossed for Rochester's recovery, we'll know that too. And so I appreciate that request.
Mr. Chair,
go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to just build on this and not to beat a dead horse here, but I really think that I had talked with staff about really seeing some value in DMC being able to bring its expertise and resources to particularly some of this economic analysis. And I think Pam's points about getting a grasp on kind of our goals relative kind of to the goals that we have, you know, for global and statewide growth. I also think that actually just getting a firmer grip on the impact on Rochester and the Rochester region will be important. And where I talked with staff about that was around actually the 5-year plan. And we're going to push forward later in the agenda here. We're going to push forward on kind of putting forth a 5-year plan, or at least and leaving some room to kind of maneuver in that plan. But when I think about how can we add value in the region as we're thinking about what are we putting forth for the next 5 years, having DMC weigh in and do some of this analysis as part of that thought process, along with some good community engagement, is an opportunity where I think some of that analysis can come forth, and we may rethink some of the 5-year goals and 5-year strategies that we put forward in the context of what may be a markedly changed world, even within the Rochester region. So links it a little bit to another topic we'll be talking about.
Well, and I think that is the bridge, because the next point we're going to talk about is our development plan. And we're required by the state to file a development plan, and there aren't real big parameters around that. My hope is that we could use that framework to really dramatically lean into what I hear being said here, which is to recalibrate for the new abnormal. And I think that's terrifically important to have a long-term piece of this. I also think one of the things that we have done before this is that while this is a 20-year initiative that's based on having a vital community that is part of a destination where Mayo is growing and the community is growing together. I mean, that's why we're here. Our definition of what that community need has evolved. Early on, it dealt often with the visitor experience, the hotel experience. Very quickly evolved to us adding in elements like affordable housing and workforce. While they were part of it, I think we've increased that piece of it. I think as we began talking about some of the common ground issues in Heart of the City and Discovery Walk and others, we began to talk more about common ground. And obviously we're going to evolve in a certain way. The one challenge with all of this is that some things you can't get back once they go. And one of the biggest elements of that is small business. And small business has, in my mind, always been abnormally strong in Rochester in a wonderful way. And it is a really dangerous time right now. And the response to that needs to be, those of you who are on the ground locally need to really know that. But I do feel that we should be in a position where we are able to support that work. Mayor, you're right that the city has a limited number of funds, and the reason there's a destination medical center, this board at all, is a recognition by the state that this city plays an outsized role in the state, and it needed partnership from the state. So seeing that, one of the things that I would like us to do is, and I asked the team to do, is to say, look at the dollars that we have right now, what's being spent and what could be reallocated. If we look at infrastructure, I believe small business is infrastructure in Rochester. So I asked them to see, is there any money that we could free up, if asked, directed by the local level, but if asked, that we could allocate. And I think that's one of the things that I think, Lisa, you were about to get to, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
So I definitely hear the long-term comments, and I want us also to think about what is our opportunity and responsibility shorter term as well.
And Chair Ryback, what is the point where we decide, and I know we're going to talk a little further and Lisa's going to present, but at what point do we decide, because this is a long-term plan, this is about 20 years, that because the economy may be slowing, well, it is slowing, but it stopped, but it's picking back up, At what point do we say maybe we move ahead with the things that we are, which I think are an economic recovery plan, as I've said before. I think that's good, and we're lucky to have that in this community. But at what point do we say, wait a minute, maybe we need to slow down too, so that we're ready for the 20 years and we're doing this right, rather than spending money now that we won't have when things have changed and we come out of it at the other side. So I guess I understand what you're saying and what we're going to move here, but I think we also need to remember this is about the long term and not the immediacy, and that was part of what DMC was for. So I'm just kind of putting that counter thought out.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I think there are two issues. What resources do we have and can we use? And then how do we use them? And so the issue we're about to look at is this issue of what do we have that we could use that doesn't jeopardize our ability to respond long term. And so separated from what to use, this discussion is if we wanted to reallocate some from here, as they look at like unspent and the capital program and some other things, what could we use? I think your point is a real good one. This is a long-term initiative, and we need to get there. The reason that I hold up that point about small business is, hold in your mind's eye any of the wonderful one-of-a-kind businesses in Rochester, and the creating a new small business is dramatically more expensive in a few years than preserving the ones that we have. And that's where there's that we have to sort of, just like you think globally and act locally, we sometimes need to act short term to think long term. And I think that's the one that I feel most anxious about, is that we would come out of this a year or two from now with dramatically fewer businesses and say, let's make sure that we create new ones. And I know everybody shares the same value. The work everybody's worked on is echoing that. So I don't think anybody needs a lecture from me on that. That's for dang sure. But let me ask Lisa to let's separate these two issues and recognize that they're really good points here about long-term and short-term. Let's isolate, if we could, for a second, the question of what could we use if we needed to have something short-term. So Lisa, can I ask you to just address that question? Because that's the question that came out of the executive committee meeting. What funds could we use if we wanted to?
Great, thank you. That's the sign of a brilliant board, when you blend the long-term and short-term topics, and we have them both on this agenda, which is great. And the beauty of a 20-year plan is just that. There will be ebbs and flows, and we know that. And we need to be prepared for both. In terms of the short term, we worked with Chair Ryback to really think about how can we provide assistance to businesses during this time, reopening, recovery, assistance, innovation, to provide some resiliency, and all keeping within the law, the letter of the law, if you will. So today we're asking you to consider that we would use some of the existing already approved CIP dollars from our 2020 CIP plan that will not be spent this year. For example, there's $4 million in the CIP plan right now for the North Broadway project, which is not planning on being spent. There are a few other projects that we will likely not be spending that much this year. And could we reallocate those dollars to help with this immediate cause? Next slide, please, Allison. We talked about many ways in which we could do that. We're working with the community right now and finding out where those gaps are and where we would.
Could I back up just a second? Because yeah. I think, the spirit of what I'm hearing from others is a necessity to think long and short term, but also just to isolate that question. What can we, so let's go back to that slide, I'm sorry, before. How do you arrive at the number 250 as opposed to 275 or 225 or 4 million?
Well, there's a couple of things. The dollars that are unspent in the CIP dollars, we want to make sure that we're not going over that. The 250 number is just based on some of the work that we've been doing with the community to identify things that will, one, actually help today some of the businesses, retail, hospitality businesses in particular, restaurants. And also, we want to make sure that we are investing in things that have more of, I guess, sustainable. So something that's long-term, something that can enhance the DMC district, within the DMC district, that can live on for years rather than just a short-term hit. We also identified some suggestions, which we'll show you in just a bit.
But I'm sorry, but before we get to suggestions, just what will we not be spending on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We likely won't be spending the $1 million on the 5-year plan. Right now, we have a placeholder in the 5-year plan as $1 million, and we don't think we will be even close to that. So we think we could take it out of that portion of the CIP.
And let me pause on that for just a second, because I know this came up at the city council meeting, and at that time, when our budget had $1 million in to do the plan, we said to the council and the mayor at that time, we understand that this number is higher than we would want to spend. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have deep parameters from the state about what that plan should be. And we've been doing planning long term, and we will do it in the future. So that's one of the key points here that, and I'm really wanting to make sure that the members understand that's something that was budgeted, but I don't think we were ever planning to do that level, and we said so at the time. Can I just pause on that and ask for any questions or comments from that on the board? Do you remember this conversation, and does this track with you guys?
Well, if you're talking about the $1 million for the 5-year plan,
yes,
there was discussion about that, and I think some of us were a little concerned that we were budgeting too much for that in the first place. And so, no matter what we do here, I'm just going to put in this reminder, and you can all throw darts at me. But the city is concerned about the amount of money that the city is spending on the DMC EDA, the DMC board, the DMC organization, not the DMCC organization, but the DMC EDA. And this was one of the places where, when we were saying we want to make cuts, is this one of the places that we were going to make cuts? That's the discussion I recall. So while we allocated the money and it's available to spend now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to be looking at the DMC budget with more scrutiny in the future, particularly as we are running out of the city's obligation for DMC over the next few years. So just want to point that out in the discussion.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry I've been interrupting you, but I wanted to just make sure we're pulling these conversations
To that
together.
end, next slide, Allison. To that end, we thought we would, if you are comfortable with moving forward with a recommendation of up to $250,000, we may not spend half that, but we just wanted to make sure that we had a pool of money that we could use to support some of these immediate term needs, rather than going back to the board every quarter to ask for dollars for that. So we put together some principles that would perhaps give you comfort in terms of using this funding. Obviously, one, we would do it with the investment would be within the DMC development district. We would meet the definition of public infrastructure in the DMC Act. We would conform to the DMC development plan that's in place today, and as we move it forward the next 5 years. We want to prioritize the investments so that it could inform long-term projects or infrastructure plans, so it's just not a one and done, if you will. Obviously, we're enhancing and growing Rochester's economy, and then Mayor Norton suggested, and this is a good suggestion, that we also make sure we're exploring other funding sources so that it's just not DMC dollars that people are going after. And then finally, I'll make one comment and just ask for suggestions or input. We also thought there should be some funding accountability, of course, as we spend this. So We are recommending that we do a monthly expenditure report to both the chair and the treasurer of this board. And we could, of course, insert it into our monthly report that we send to all of you as well. And then we would certainly report out at quarterly board meetings. So I'll pause there, Chair Ryback, for
Okay.
the comments.
So what I would like to do is to move, if I could get a second for purposes of discussion, because I know there will be a resolution that would be to approve this $250,000 expenditure, up to $250,000 in the public realm and public infrastructure projects as described here. So I want to put that on the table for purposes of discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so why don't I open it for discussion?
So I have a question about the EDA, about this. Is this going to go through the CIP process still? The funds that we're using, and it's not going to go into the EDA budget?
Lisa?
Yeah, it comes out of the CIP budget, Mayor Norton.
But will it go through the CIP process, how the money that you're spending that, or are you planning on putting into the EDA budget?
It goes through the CIP process. So that process is already approved dollars, and then we clear it through this board as we start to spend it, which is the funding accountability on the bottom that you would see.
And then the other piece, when you say you're reporting to the DMC Corp Chair and Treasurer, will that include Dale?
Yes.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
So this is Member Williams, just wanting to clarify here. So the recommendation, the action, is to take $250,000 out of funds that would have been used for 5-year planning purposes, and to redirect them more on a short-term basis to help with economic recovery. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is Kathleen. I just wanted to weigh in here. The resolution C that is in front of you actually is a little bit different from the normal public infrastructure project approval in that it's got examples of the kinds of things that might be necessary to provide sustainable public realm improvements. And the examples in DRF's resolution, and they include signage and wayfinding and sanitary stations and jersey barriers and the like. This is, like any other public infrastructure project, though, subject to approval by the City Council. So from here, it goes to the City Council for approval. The way that we set it up was to transfer the money in the CIP from the North Broadway project rather than from the 5-year plan. That can be changed if you would like that changed. And then the final thing I would point out is that the principles that Lisa just reported on are actually part of the resolution found on page 3 of this resolution, so that the DMCC board would be adopting this subject to the principles that are laid out here.
Mr. Chair, this is Randy.
Yes.
Would like to comment?
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, one of the, and I think maybe the mayor touched on this a little bit. I'm a little bit conflicted on the what's being presented here. I'm certainly very appreciative, and I fully understand the desire to want to help. But I can't help but keep going back to, you know, and many of us were part of the origination of DMC, and a lot of the funding, it was stated over and over, is that it was meant to assist with the extraordinary costs for DMC, and particularly public infrastructure. And I worry a little bit about, and I did look at the granularity of some of the projects that might be supported. sanitizing stations and so forth. And I guess, technically speaking, I understand that it might be appropriate to use funds for these sorts of purposes, but I still am wanting to kind of hold back and reserve the use of these funds, DMC funds, for those projects that would have the highest and best use for the funds and the highest and best outcomes. So again, I'm conflicted in the funding wanting to help and with the economic recovery, but I'm also a little uncomfortable with, whether this is necessarily the highest and best use of the funds. And maybe it's something that should be reserved for later discussion if, our economic situation doesn't improve like we all hope it will. Just wanted to share those thoughts.
Hearing both leaders of the city express these reservations, I think we have to take very seriously. The spirit of what certainly I wanted to do in this case was to recognize that as Destination Medical Center was created because the state recognized that it should give additional support to the city of Rochester to accomplish this long term. The same is true in the short term, that my intent was to have us identify what resources could be used for this and be very clear that direction come from local levels. So be it anything on that list or not, I want us specifically to go on record as saying that we have identified dollars we could use to help at an extraordinary period of time in Rochester. So I'm open to this. Just 2 seconds. I'm open to this resolution being crafted by us together to give us the ability to use those dollars and have them be deployed in ways that fit more closely the needs you may identify. But go ahead, Member Wheelock.
Well, I think all of the comments have been really helpful, and I'm sure the staff will find them really helpful to guide them about next steps in this process as well. I'm struggling about, the difference between a response to our immediate environment and the strategies that we're going to need to employ that are more along the lines of recovery from our immediate environment. And I think, there's no clear delineation about when you move from a response to a recovery orientation. But I am struck by your earlier comment, Mr. Chair, that sometimes an intervention to avoid a result is a much more economical strategy in the long run than waiting to fill vacant storefronts or rebuild, recruit and fill vacant spaces and find new businesses and provide working capital. And you want to be thoughtful about, what strategies you use. So ideally there is a longer term benefit, but some support or intervention during the immediate first phases of a crisis, I think are really warranted for us. And frankly, are a much more compelling use of available funds than thinking about, the next 5-year plan process. And so I am very supportive of this. My only request would be, the thoughtfulness for all those involved in the decision making about making sure that you're really intervening strategically. And many of whether it's a small business, whether it's a nonprofit, many of the first that will not survive this are the ones that were struggling even in a healthy economy, and that's not where we would want to invest our resources. We want to, prop up and retain strategically the business activity that is going to be most important to meeting our goals in the long run. So I would advocate that we give a lot of discretion to the decision makers about using their judgment about this, because there is no real data that is going to convince us that this is absolutely the right decision. But I do think some
investment in a response that has benefit to our longer term goals is really highly valuable, and I would be supportive of that.
I appreciate that, and I think you did a better job of articulating it than I was trying to articulate. You know, I guess I'm putting this through the lens of my parents' drugstore, and I think right now they would be very close to going out of business. And if they knew there was an entity that a few years from now could come in with a study about why we needed more drugstores in the city of Minneapolis, but they didn't help get people into the store to save the one that they had, they would ask about the common sense of that. When I hear something like a sanitizing station, I think, well, that isn't long-term, but then when you really think about every single customer who possibly can make it into that store and put dollar into their hands is doing us a favor by keeping that business open that we're going to love and brag about and put in our brochures a few years from now. So that is the value that I'm trying to get at. And I think your point about giving discretion to those at the local level makes a lot of sense, especially if we put that lens on this isn't just to plug a hole, it's to perpetuate a future.
For sure.
Mr. Chair, this is Randy Staver again.
Yes.
And I do appreciate Commissioner Wheelock's phrasing of strategic intervention. And I do want to underscore once again that we're very appreciative of what's being proposed here. And leaving it to the discretion of the local body, I think is very helpful. But again, I do appreciate that phrasing of strategic intervention so that we do use these things, these funds for the best of all purposes.
Mr. Chair, this is Member Williams.
Yes.
I have to agree wholeheartedly. I think the timing feels right, the amount feels right, the source feels clear, and it feels like the right source. If we do specifically say we take this out of the 5-year planning revenues that we had projected, or that line item, feels like it makes sense. So I would be supportive of the project and the use of funds as well.
Oh, I get to try to get back in here. I've been waiting.
Yes, Mayor, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So I appreciate what President Staver said, and it is, for those of us who have been involved in this from the beginning, it is a constant pull that some of the rest of you maybe don't feel, and some of you may struggle with this too, but to make sure that we are fulfilling the intent that we told the legislature we were going to do. I have done nothing but worry, as I think President Staver and I know that Lisa and Patrick have done, about what's the state of our small businesses in our community. I'm not going to say this very articulately, and I apologize, but what I'm trying to say is people turn to DMC because it's a pot of money all the time. Go to DMC, get money from DMC. So a couple things. I don't want DMC to be viewed as the government. I don't want them to be viewed as a pot of money that can rescue everyone. And I want to point out that it only rescues people in the DMC district, and the whole rest of the community gets a little bitter about the help from DMC for the people downtown. Granted, that's what the purpose of the DMC is for that downtown sector. I just want to say that we could be creating a little bit more animosity if we continue on the path that we're going down, which may be to help a few businesses or maybe many businesses. I don't know how far 250 can go. I know, Randy, we thought it would go further than it did when we gave out our grants. It doesn't go as far as we hope. In the downtown area, ignoring the rest of the community. I want to say number 2 says meet definition of infrastructure. And I don't see a temporary sanitation station as necessarily a permanent public infrastructure. So I want to be really careful. And I think Randy and the board and I will be looking at expenditures and make sure that we really are upholding the whole concept of public infrastructure and the 5 or 6 or 7 pillars that we're supposed to be enhancing in our downtown area. So I'm not speaking against doing something. I'm just saying we have to use real care and not move too quickly, too fast, and creating another governmental body that's seen as the answer to problems, particularly when it can't reach the whole community. So that's just a lot of stuff out there, but they're the things I worry about. They're the things I talk to Lisa and Patrick about. They're the things that we hear in the community often. And I just want to make sure that we are really careful about the choices we're making here.
You know, when I think about my role on this board, I think about my role as representing, I'm one of the 4 people the governor appoints to be representatives of the whole state. And I happen to also be a person who really loves Rochester. And when I think about that responsibility, I think that the state of Minnesota has made a decision that Rochester is a special community that deserves special tools because of this special opportunity that's going on. So I can certainly understand why someone would be concerned that money would go to one part of town or another. But the part of town that the state has said they're going to put money into happens to be defined by geography. That's what we've got opportunity to do. So I see us having the opportunity to step forward and say, instead of sitting on the sidelines as small businesses struggle, because I've run a city and you guys run a city and we understand that you don't have unlimited funds to do all this. The state should step in and say, unlike any other city in the state of Minnesota, we're going to give some specific help here to the small businesses, because we define infrastructure as including small businesses, because of the infrastructure that we build this destination on includes the small business. That there is a complicated local dichotomy where you've got people in other parts of town who aren't in that geography. We don't have the opportunity to do that. The funds are dedicated to this piece of town. But it does mean if the city has X amount of dollars to help a small business, you can use them in the other part of town. You have more in the other part of town because we're attempting to try to put money into the core of town. So somebody shouldn't resent that. They should say, good, that's helping to create more help for small business at a critical time in Rochester. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I understand the dynamics that you're wrestling with, but I do feel that it would be wrong for this board to sit on the sidelines when small businesses are struggling if we could provide some help. And that's, I guess, what I see the spirit of this is.
Mr. Chair, I have to leave. I have a doctor's appointment. I am now 18 minutes late for.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave, and I appreciate your comments. We'll just leave it at that.
So let me call the vote at this point then, so you have a chance to.
Mr. Chair, this is Kathleen. Before you do that,
Yes.
Resolution C currently says that the money is being transferred from the North Broadway project. And I hear from the discussion that the preference would be to transfer it from the 5-year plan update line.
Yes.
And so if that is the amendment, I would suggest that you propose it as a friendly amendment to your motion, and then I can take care of it.
Okay, Mayor, if you'll allow me to move that quickly. I'm sorry, first up, are there other comments?
Oh, Mr. Chair, this is Jim Campbell. For those of us that don't see downtown Rochester every day, I had the opportunity yesterday to see it all day. And
no, I understand, Mayor. I think we understand. Go ahead, Jim.
I tried to get from Gonda to a small business, which is typically across the street. It took me about 15 minutes and a couple of thousand extra steps. The district is really torn up, which is great. I mean, that's what this is all about. But I got to say that those small businesses in the district must really be suffering as a result of all the good work we're doing. And so I'm in favor of us doing something a bit extra as it relates to the experience that we're having worldwide. I think now is the time for us to try to help those small businesses in any way we possibly can.
Very good. Other comments? If not, with the motion on the first, an amendment to change the source of the funds from Broadway to the long-term plan. Do I have a second to that motion?
Mr. Chair, this is Paul Williams. I second.
Okay, thank you. All those I'm sorry, I got to call the roll. Commissioner Beer.
Mr. Chair, if
Yes.
you accept it as a friendly amendment, we don't have to have any kind of roll call.
I accept it as a friendly amendment. Excellent. Okay. On the motion on the table right now to approve the expenditure, Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Here, aye.
Member Doherty, Mayor Norton, are you still here or have you had to leave? President Staber,
Aye.
Member Wheelock,
Aye.
Secretary Williams,
Aye.
I support as well, and it passes. So we need to finish on time. I wonder, Lisa and Kathleen, if you could help direct us on how we might be able to make choices here to make sure we complete before noon.
Lisa, what do you think?
I think the next two items, Chair Ryback, we can go through very quickly because they're important updates, but we'll do them very quickly. We've got two items that do need approval after that. So I think we're going to fly a little bit here. If we can go
Sounds
quick.
good.
The next one is basically something we do every year. It's our DMC funding request. And I simply want to share with you that we are asking for you today to endorse our priorities, which I'll go through in a minute. And we've got a process and timeline, which we've gone through every year as well. So if we go to the next slide, the funding request, just so that everybody remembers when we go through this every year, we come forward and we will be coming forward at your August meeting with a capital improvement funding request, our DMC operating budget request, the DMC EDA work plan and operating budget, our City of Rochester staff work plan. These are the city staff that are paid for by DMC, and then our working capital loan. We the timeline for this process, May, obviously we're talking about it right now. June and July, we put all of this together. We work in partnership with the city on this request as well. The DMC board of directors, usually RT, after this, you'll ask for input from people if they want to be part of an input process as we build this plan together. This is our plan for 2021. In early August, the EDA board will consider the funding request. August, your board considers the request. In September, City Council. The priorities last year were these first 6, and we feel like those priorities remain very solid and very consistent with our plan. Transportation, of course, common ground. We've got a lot of public realm projects moving forward right now, considering Heart of the City and Discovery Walk. Housing and workforce have been front and center for us in partnership with many community organizations. Our transformative projects such as Discovery Square. The sustainability work, we have aggressive sustainability and energy programs, and we added this year as a priority this COVID-19 recovery and resiliency, which we've just spent quite a bit of time visiting on because it's going to weave into all of the work that we did, and of course we'll have some gaps in knowledge over the next several years, but we want to make sure that we are aware of that. And included in our work plan, of course, you can see all of the work that we do. It just those things support all of these 7 priorities. So 2 things we're asking from this board. 1, are you comfortable with the priorities that we have listed here so that we can start working on the work plan and budget that will make sure that we move those forward? And then 2, if there are any board volunteers, it would be helpful for us just to get some input from them a couple of times before we bring it forward to the board.
And I think, you know, this has been part of a fairly robust discussion we've had in the past, and bluntly, with more time, we should probably give a little more room to that discussion right now. But I do want to say that this board that we want to establish is one where a lot of those discussions can take place and bring back to this group recommendations so that we can have those discussions. So love to see if there are some who would like to be part of that committee. Are there any people who want to volunteer right now?
Mr. Chair, this is Randy Staver. I would volunteer to be part of that budgeting and prioritization process.
Very good. Thank you. Others?
This is Jim Beer. I'd like to be on that, seeing as I'm your treasurer.
That's good. Thank you very much. Others?
Jim Campbell, I've done it before. I'll do it again.
All right. We thank you on that. Others?
Mr. Chair, Pam Wheelock, I'm available if you need another body.
That sounds great. How do we deal with quorum issues here? What is the maximum amount of members we can have?
Well,
Kathleen?
Mr. Chair, we want to be careful that this is an informal voluntary group. It's not an official committee of anything. Our quorum requirement is 6. But I just want to emphasize this is very informal and not a regular appointed committee.
That's a very good point. Okay, so we have the 4 members there, and if others want to have feedback, just communicate that with Lisa, and we will take that from there. Okay.
Thank you.
Lisa, do you want to keep going?
So our next update is, we've already talked a bit about this, and to Board Member Wheelock's point, it's really important that we do start to think about our strategies for the future, and that's what our 5-year update plan is. We'll go through it mostly about timing, process, and plan right now. Considering all the things that the board just talked about, I'm asking Patrick to walk through our plan elements. He's pointing our process on this. And Patrick, if you can quickly walk through our recommendations for this piece.
Yes, as has been discussed, there is a requirement to update the development plan. Fortunately, we have a solid framework to build on because we have a great plan that was endorsed and approved in 2015, and there have been subsequent updates like the Discovery Square study, the public realm studies, the integrated transportation studies, all of which have been advanced and reviewed by this board. And so as we enter into this 5-year update, we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from a very strong place. Of course, the big change that we've all been talking about is how will our economy be disrupted as a result of the pandemic and the fallout associated with that. So we are keenly interested in really trying to build projections that look out over a near term, a 5-year window, around what kind of changes in the might we expect. Knowing that in a year arc of time that may smooth out, but in the near term we know that there will be a significant impact, and so we will be investing in updating our projections with this in mind, knowing that we don't have all of the information and won't have all of the information even in the next 3 to 6 months. Having said that, there are parts of this update that I think we can clearly advance. The mobility section, this really relates to transportation, and of course there's been considerable work there. Public realm, streets and sewers, the city has commissioned and maintains studies related to their sewer systems and sewer plans and capacity. The private development, so we talked earlier about the business development and marketing that we do. One of the areas where, and we'll hear more about this in a moment, that where probably Rochester is best positioned, one of the probably best positioned in the country, is knowing that the life science, technology and bioscience fields are really areas that will likely continue to grow while other sectors in private development may slow down for a period of time. And then the operating model, which really refers to the way in which we function organizationally. The mayor referenced the EDA operating budget. There was an original concept for how the DMC operations would be developed. We have evolved that over time, including 5 city staff members who are paid for by the DMC initiative that are actually in City Hall. So that's we will relook at the operating model and bring forth recommendations around that, and then lay out the capital improvement investments necessary to achieve these objectives. So all of this to say that we have begun our work. We've done the look back to document the progress to date, We are updating the projections, bearing in mind the disruption we're faced with, and we are benchmarking ourselves against peer communities that have a focus around major healthcare institution. We will come back in oh, somebody's doorbell just
Whoever
rang.
that is just another member of the group. That's very cool.
That's right.
There's Pam's friendly guard dog, it looks like.
He gets really excited about infrastructure, so.
That's right. So we are building the information base that will help us in making key decisions. And then just last, I'll just go to the timeline. I think there's a. So we expect to bring back to you in August an updated development plan where we can show you what we know and the things that we don't know and can't possibly know at this point. That will be the foundation for a plan that we will advance to City Council, whereby there will be a public comment period, and then back to the DMC board in November. So that's the current outline we are working against, and have appreciated the guidance that you've provided both in this board context, but also individuals who have offered advice and suggestions as we're working towards this update.
Thank you very much. Lisa, can we move to the project updates?
Can. We've got a couple of quick project updates. The first one.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Paul. I should have called for comment.
Yeah, it so I'm supportive of this. I've talked with staff about this, and I just want to reiterate my point about we are in a rapidly changing environment, and in my conversation with staff, I think this issue of taking some time to kind of assess the economic environment, I think is important, and being careful not to rush too quickly into a new plan, I think is important, given the shifting ground that we're standing on. Now, again, I do not want to keep my head in the sand. I think we do need to keep our foot on the gas, but I also think creating a new 5-year plan in a very transformational moment here, having this is moving quickly, completed basically by August, September, October, November, feels to me like it's moving very quickly. Staff has assured me that there's room for kind of movement and flexibility, to kind of adapt and adjust down the road. But just for the record, I just want to put it out there that in the world of kind of planning, obviously this is an unusual moment. So just wanted to kind of put that on the record there.
It's a really good point. And let me just ask a question toward that. Patrick, as I understand the situation, we have the ball and we can shoot when we need to, meaning the timeline is as laid out. If, as that evolves, we see a need to take more time to develop it, move it otherwise, is there any reason why we can't, as time goes on, adjust that to meet, I think, Paul's rightful desire to make sure that we've got the time to deal with a very unusual context.
Absolutely. In fact, our original schedule had us at today's meeting coming forward with a plan. So we have been adjusting already, and so we are prepared for that potentiality.
Okay. Does that make sense, Paul?
It does. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, good. Any other comments on the development plan? Okay, now, Lisa, let me turn back to the project updates.
All right. We've got 2 project updates that we want to share with you. One is Discovery Square, and the other is Heart of the City. Discovery Square, if you go to the next slide, Allison, I'm just going to stay on this slide. We're not going to use I'm going to catch up with time here, but Basically, I want the board to know a couple of things. We are advancing the Discovery Walk Development Project, which has gotten a lot of support, and it's another public realm project that really connects the districts of downtown, meaning heart of the city, with Discovery Square. Discovery Square, of course, being that one sector that we are reading so much about recently that I call it a bell ringer. It can aim for continued success throughout this COVID environment. So Discovery Walk is that connector. We've been doing some design documentation work that will, we've already approved that. That will continue right now. We've done some fascinating co-design work with Kevin on our team, working with underrepresented communities. So these communities are giving input to us in terms of what they would like to see in this linear park in front of Discovery Square area. And we're working on some district energy analysis underway right now. We're also working and paying attention to this climate accommodation and potential subway accommodation. So as the transit line comes down Second and lands a couple of short blocks from Discovery Square, we want to make sure that we are, we have the ability, as we're looking at Discovery Walk, to accommodate just that, this climate controlled area. RT Ryback is a big supporter of that and is helping us steer that discussion, and I think he's right, and we are going to continue to move on that front. So 2020 construction is our plan for Discovery Walk. We plan to begin construction at Discovery Walk at that time. The second thing is awareness of Discovery Square 2. Discovery Square 2, you've approved that at our last board meeting. That work continues. Our one Discovery Square is about 90% leased right now. 2 Discovery Square, Mortensen maintains their optimism to advance Discovery Square 2, and we're working closely with Mayo, Mortensen, the city of Rochester, to create the parking solution that we need to give them confidence in doing a groundbreaking yet this year. So we're very excited about that. We believe the timing couldn't be better because you know, we build this building, the economy starts to rebound, we hope, and bioscience, life science will be strong and ready for this next building. What I wanted to do is give a little airtime to the work that we're doing, particularly on the entrepreneurship environment. We do some great programming right now. Chris Shad from our team is working on an assistive tech challenge, which is that program. It's a signature program for DMC to encourage startups and entrepreneurial communities to develop assistive technologies for people with disabilities. It's become very interesting for us. It's become a program that we're starting to be recognized for. We have participants from the county as well as Canada that has participated in our workshops and this program. And it's one example of many right now as we start to build the entrepreneurial environment. One of the things we've been doing with Medical Alley over the past couple of years is doing just that, creating a partnership with Medical Alley. And they've got some exciting projects happening with DMC in terms of creating space in the Rochester community and the Twin Cities community to bring this life science, bioscience technology corridor to life, particularly landing in Rochester. I'd like to introduce right now, just to give you a few comments on that, Shay Mandel, the president and CEO of Medical Alley, and Frank Jaskulski, the vice president of intelligence, just to give you a few words about what we're planning to do in this particular area.
Thank you, Lisa, Mr. Chair, board members. Very hypersensitive to the clock. So I'll just say at the onset, certainly if there's anything we can provide to the board in terms of information, expertise, or follow-up from a shortened presentation, we'll work with Lisa and the team to provide anything that you're interested in. A couple of quick comments. About 2 years ago, we started what amounted to 6 months of working with leaders from around the state and every sector of healthcare to identify what were the great challenges for Minnesota over the next 10 years. And I'll also add that obviously we were incredibly supportive of DMC as that moved through the legislature, continue to be so. and view DMC and Rochester in particular as a key partner and a significant opportunity for Minnesota. The challenges we identified, fairly simple: the competitiveness of the environment, the talent attraction and development component for our state's workforce. But the two real prime components were having that vibrant early stage ecosystem and then telling our story, making sure that Medical Alley in Minnesota is recognized as the global epicenter of health innovation and care around the world, and that people connect our brands like DMC to our state and see us as the Silicon Valley of healthcare. Obviously, we're making the most progress on and are most committed to what we do to impact that early stage ecosystem, working with entrepreneurs, investors, and organizations like DMC around the state. Frank Jaskulke, as Lisa mentioned, is my colleague who leads that program for us. That is the meat of this presentation. So I'll turn it over to Frank to give you a little more information. But again, thank you for your time. And we are here to, again, provide expertise, leadership, information, anything that we can do to help both DMC and Rochester. So Frank, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shay. And in the interest of time, I jotted down some remarks so you won't have to worry about me rambling too much. Again, my name is Frank Jaskulke, and thank you for having me here today. I'll speak briefly to introduce the work we are doing in collaboration with the Destination Medical Center and others, and would welcome your questions afterwards, assuming we have time. As Shay said, Medical Alley is the global epicenter of health innovation and care today. During the COVID crisis, it has been the leadership of organizations like Mayo Clinic, 3M, and Medtronic, Minnesota institutions, that have made such a difference. Medical Alley Association is working to make sure that tomorrow's life-saving innovations are developed right here. To do that, we must ensure that the innovators around the state have the support they need to turn ideas into products, into companies, and into global leaders. As Shay said, we spent the last 2 years working with entrepreneurs, investors, corporate leaders, and other stakeholders to understand the challenges and the opportunities for this region to retain its global leadership. That knowledge guides our collaboration with the Destination Medical Center today. As a nonprofit association, we have a unique ability to bring leaders together, build a common vision, and organize the resources to execute on that vision. If we don't, we risk losing our leadership in healthcare the way we lost our leadership in computing technology 35 years ago. Through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the early 80s, Minnesota led the world in computer technology. Silicon Valley was Minnesota. Numerous factors led that industry to all but disappear, migrating to other states. In 1984, Earl Bakken, the founder of Medtronic, started Medical Alley Association in the wake of that industry disappearing. He saw what happened in computing and tasked us with ensuring that it didn't happen in healthcare. Since 1984, our healthcare leadership has only grown, creating tens of thousands of jobs and, more importantly, saving millions of lives around the world. But today, as we well know, healthcare is changing dramatically. Communities around the world and in the United States are investing in facilities, training, and startups because they want what we have here. In Houston, home of the Texas Medical Center, millions have been invested in the Texas Medical Center X facility, a development akin to Discovery Square. That has attracted startups from around the world and the likes of large companies like J&J. In Chicago, Matter was developed as a healthcare incubator, now expanding to New York, and has attracted global attention. Ohio is spending billions to create the medical capital, and across Nashville, digital health companies are emerging by the dozens out of Healthcare Corporation of America. Our competition is stronger than ever, but so is our community's ability to respond. The Destination Medical Center project is among the most important investments Minnesotans have ever made. We were proud to work alongside Mayo Clinic, with the Rochester community and others to support the legislation, and then to work with the DMC EDA from day one on its execution. We believe the COVID crisis makes action even more important. We've been fortunate that we continue to see international companies choosing Medical Alley as their US headquarters, seeing local companies expanding, and seeing new companies get funded. At the same time, we see other businesses struggling and working to adapt to this changing environment. We owe it to them to adapt alongside them by developing infrastructure that supports the future of healthcare. Through collaboration with the DMC and other stakeholders, that's what we are doing. We've developed a plan of action to ensure that Minnesota remains a global leader in healthcare during, through, and after the crisis. To do this, first, we organized the community around a common vision that this place should be the global epicenter of health innovation and care. Second, we've worked to identify what are the gaps and the challenges that hold the community back to being a startup epicenter. We've identified things around capital, strategic and corporate partnerships, mentorship, and infrastructure needs like space. Third, we are now building a coalition of entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, investors, and other stakeholders in order to execute on this plan and develop the supporting services that are needed. Critical to this success is high quality, affordable space in Rochester and in the Twin Cities. That is why we so support the Discovery Square project. DMC has made engaging startups in Discovery Square a priority from day one. They took a thoughtful approach by proving the market and recruiting marquee large organizations like Boston Scientific and Philips, as well as engaging local startups like Rian. As Medical Alley Association works with DMC to develop a plan for dedicated startup space, we are looking at options within One Discovery Square to leverage some of that remaining space while planning for a larger and more significant activity in Discovery Square 2. We will do this by bringing that coalition of partners together to share resources so that no one organization has to bear the full burden. If this is truly to be a community asset, then we need to involve the whole community. As the Rochester ecosystem grows, we will need more space for innovative startups, some homegrown ventures, and some drawn from around the world who decide they need to be in the epicenter of healthcare for their success. Developing space in One Discovery Square and then later Discovery Square 2 will make the entire state more competitive, support job creation, and attract investment from around the world. When paired with similar developments that are happening in the Twin Cities and across the state, we can more closely link the two ecosystems, building on the strengths of each, making us all more competitive.
Can I tell you how much we appreciate this?
Yes.
And just wanted to know that you and Shay are really, we're extremely excited to have you here. Because of our time commitment, we're going to have to move on. But I just want to say that as somebody who does work in the cities and in Rochester, you guys are an important bridge. So thank you to both you and Shay, and we really appreciate having you here and look forward to getting to work with you more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lisa, we have two issues remaining, as I understand it. The capital improvement program, we've got a resolution, and transportation.
Correct.
And members, we will make sure we get a hard stop at noon.
Yep. So let's just move forward with the CIP reallocation of funds. They're pretty self-explanatory. Patrick, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, there are reports in your materials, so if you need any background, look to that or follow up with any questions. There is a resolution in front of you asking for modification of the capital improvement program that would include adding $1.62 million to the Heart of the City project to support the snowmelt system that will go under the streets and sidewalks in the Heart of the City project. This is an additional expenditure beyond what was originally budgeted. The second part of the resolution is reallocation of funds for a sewer diversion project that was scheduled to occur and pre-approved by this board for 2021. So this is not new money so much as change in timing. There's an opportunity to move this ahead now. So the request in front of you is a single action around these adjustments. There is a letter of support from the city with respect to this. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mayor. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Member Wheelock. Thank you. And Patrick, I appreciate that you were focused on projects we could get done now to make sure we keep the economic stimulus from our work at least going in the city. So with a motion on the table to approve, Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Member Campbell.
Aye.
Member Doherty. Mayor Norton, you are back.
Don't tell anyone how fast I drove to Mayo and back. Aye.
That's good. President Staber.
Aye.
Member Wheelock.
Aye.
Secretary Williams.
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. I'm sorry, I vote in the affirmative as well, and so that passes. And our final issue is transportation.
Thank you. Or Lisa, you want me to go ahead with this?
Go for it, yep.
So we'll just go to, again, the request slide. There is materials in your packet that provide additional information, but the resolution and request in front of you deals with advancing the rapid transit project forward. You had approved a locally preferred alternative. That's the FTA term that's used for describing the rapid transit route and mode and system. You approved that, and we have been working towards that being a route that would take us from Cascade Lake to Graham Park via the downtown, with the intention of having a September 4th submittal to the FTA so that we can be in the grant cycle, competing in the grant cycle that is for calendar year 2020. Today, we are proposing that we adopt a phased approach to this implementation so that we can keep the project going while we continue to work with the county and the city on the southeast end of the route. This may require, Allison, that we show the slide of the route so that I am making this more clear. So if you go back to the first slide as the slide that shows the route that is the locally preferred alternative, again, from Cascade Lake to Graham Park on the southeast end via the downtown. There is work that we still need to do with the city and the county in defining the site layout and the functionality of the southeast end, which is on county-owned property. And we do not believe we're able to get to successful resolution of that in a way that would be timely for our September 4th submittal goal. And so we are proposing that we do this project in two phases. The first phase being, and we'll show that now, the first phase being from Cascade Lake to the government center via 2nd Street. And so we are proposing two things. One, that you adopt this phasing approach. And then secondly, because the western end of this route is outside of the current DMC boundary, that we are also recommending that we initiate the boundary modification process as defined in the state law around boundary modification. So those are two things that are being asked of you: phasing and boundary modification.
Chair, I'll move approval.
Sure. Let's see. I hear Commissioner Beer and I hear Mayor Norton. And Mayor Norton, as Vice Chair, if I have to chair a meeting at noon, I wonder if I could turn over the chairing of this meeting to you.
Of course. And
Okay.
I could defer to Mr. Beer. I was just going to move approval so we could discuss.
Yeah, I have a couple comments. You know, with the county, we had a small working group with city councilmen and city staff and county, and we thought we had a pretty good agreement. Apparently that didn't work so well. So we're willing to work with anybody to move this thing forward. However, we will be, again, we'll work with anybody, but we are not going to wait around. I've been instructed from the county board that, you know, we're going to move ahead with our own plans. And again, we will work with anybody, but we think that we're in a good place right now, and we're going to go ahead and continue to develop the land as possible. We're getting mixed signals from the city, whether they even want to have that as the hub, that, you know, we adopted that as the preferred alternative. And now we hear that it might be the Kmart site. So with all that being said, we're just going to go ahead and do our own thing. Willing to work with anybody, but we're going to just plow ahead on our own. But with that, I'd second the mayor's motion.
Mr. Chair, this is Randy Staver. I have a comment. Mayor Norton, are you chair?
Oh, he stepped off. I was looking for his picture and he's already gone.
Just
Mr.
a
Staver.
comment. I am going to respectfully disagree with Commissioner Beer. I think the city continues to consider the Southeast Hub as a very viable alternative. I don't believe for a moment that the city council would support using the Kmart site, knowing some of the issues we've gone through there. I think quite simply all we're doing is reacting to the current economic environment, the phasing, and that's why this proposal is in front of you today. But, you know, I just want to make it very clear that from my position and the city council, we very much consider the Southeast Hub as a viable part of the solution. It's just going to happen a little bit further downstream. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. We're still in the game.
Well,
Thank
Randy,
you,
I'd
Mr.
like to
Staver,
respond to
for
that.
calling Mr. Beer. Just a minute. Thank you, President Staver. I had Paul lit up first. I wanted to make sure if you were going to speak, Paul, your square was lit up.
Oh, no, that's
Okay.
just, I don't have any comment. Thank you.
Okay, then Commissioner Beer, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of history still. Again, we'll work with anybody, willing to do anything. However, you know, we had a small working group with a couple of city councilmen, you know, because there was a lot of moving parts here, obviously. A couple county board members, city staff, county staff. We came to what we thought were the hot button issues, and we brought that. We had what I thought, I was not on this subcommittee, but it was presented to the county that we had a workable solution that would be workable for both. It came to the county board and it was passed 7-0. It went to the city council and it was put down 7-0. So that tells me that we're having a failure to communicate. And actually, I've been instructed by the county board that since we're having this trouble communication, we will work with anybody, but any proposals coming from the city, we'd like them to be vetted before the city council and passed by the city council before they bring to us, because what we were doing before clearly was not working.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. So with what's before us, which is approval of the 2nd Avenue, what's called the West Transit Village, is there any further question or discussion about that? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, we have to do a roll call, I believe.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Do you want me to do it?
Yes, please.
All right, happy to. Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Doherty. Chair Ryback. President Staver.
Aye.
Ms. Wheelock.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mayor Norton.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
The motion passes. I see an additional item on our agenda. Are we going to move to that, or are we adjourning? I was unclear.
Madam Chair, this is Lisa. I just want to make sure that the motion that we passed was 1 for the continued phasing and 2 for the boundary modification. Is that correct?
Yes, he said they were one motion.
All right.
Should we check with legal to make sure? That was my understanding.
Madam Chair, the phasing was not part of the resolution, but we can include it if that's the will of the board as a separate motion with the same vote as the resolution.
Okay, members, do we just need a quick roll call then on the second? Should it be moved and seconded in a second roll call? Is that what I'm hearing?
To be most clear, yes.
Okay, would
So
someone
moved.
like to move the second resolution, please?
Wheelock moves the second resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Campbell, it looks like.
Yes.
Great. Any further discussion on the second resolution? Seeing none, Kathleen?
Happy to take the roll. Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Mr. Doherty, Chair Rybeck, President Staber,
Aye.
Wheelock,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
and Chair Norton.
Aye.
Thank you.
And that passes. Okay, now to the end, I have another item on our agenda.
I think what we'll do, Madam Chair, is we have some district energy updates that we'd like to bring forward, but they can be brought forward at our August meeting. So I think we can adjourn the meeting if there are no other comments, other than we want to make sure that people understand that the next DMC board meeting is actually August 27th at 9:30. We had that in the September timeframe. We moved it forward so that as we bring our 5-year plan forward, we have enough time between board meetings for the public vetting for that. And
Thank you
also
very much.
an update on the September 4th funding request for transportation at that time also.
Terrific. And it is on the agenda, the last item on the agenda. So we'll move the district energy updates to forward that to the next meeting, if I'm understanding that correctly, which will be August 27th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. If there's no other comments or business before the board, I would call for an adjournment.
So moved.
Vote on that? Yeah, thank you.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? And Kathleen, I think we need to do it again.
Okay, we'll do it quick. Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
I think he preempted you.
okay, Mr. Doherty, Chair Rybeck, President Staber,
Aye.
Ms. Wheelock,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Chair Norton.
Aye. Thank you so much, everyone. We stand adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.